This is Margie Barrett of Lansdale, Pennsylvania, listening to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on TKUT 90.3 FM Montreal.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the International Radio Report for Sunday, July the 14th, 2024. We thank you for tuning in to our show on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill. We are here every week at this time with 30 minutes of news and information of things going on in the world of radio, locally, internationally, wherever it may be. So we'll get started right away. A lot of different things going on. Jill, you found an update to a story we had quite some time ago from the ARRL.
So the ARRL finally confirms ransomware gang stole data in cyberattack. This is by Sergiu Gatlan of Bleeping Computer. The American Radio Relay League, ARRL, finally confirmed that some of its employees' data was stolen in a May ransomware attack initially described as a serious incident. The ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, said in data breach notifications recently sent to impacted individuals that it detected the sophisticated ransomware incident after the attackers breached and encrypted its computer systems on May 14th. After discovering the breach, ARRL took impacted systems offline to contain the incident and hired external forensic experts to help assess the attack's impact. In early June, it also revealed that its systems were hacked by a malicious international cyber group in a sophisticated network attack. Our investigation has determined that the unauthorized third party may have acquired your personal information during this incident, it told individuals whose data was stolen. Please know that we have taken all reasonable steps to prevent your data from being further published or distributed, have notified, and are working with federal law enforcement to investigate. Impacted data may have contained your personal information, including your name, address, and social security number. In a filing with the Office of Maine's Attorney General this week, the organization claims that this data breach only affected 150 employees. Although ARRL said no evidence was found that the stolen personal information was misused, it still decided to provide those impacted by this data breach with 24 months of free identity monitoring through Kroll out of an abundance of caution. ARRL has not linked the attack to a specific ransomware gang, but sources told Bleeping Computer that the embargo ransomware operation was behind the incident. However, although this ransomware group first surfaced in May and has since added only 8 victims to its dark web leak site, some already removed, likely because they paid the ransom, ARRL has yet to be listed. ARRL stated that the breach notifications that they have taken all reasonable steps to prevent your data from further being published or distributed, which could be taken to mean that a ransom was paid to prevent the data from being leaked. First Mac Limited, the largest non-bank lender in Australia, is one of the victims who had over 500 gigabytes of stolen data leaked on embargo's websites. It's a difficult thing. Did they pay a ransom? That's a good question. It seems it's only employees from what they say, so maybe not anywhere else or anybody else or any amateur radio that is in the ARRL. It seems to be really localized to the employees right now.
Yeah, I think that's indicated by them saying that one of the things that may have been stolen was social insurance numbers or social security numbers in the U.S. So anyways, a little more information. It would be interesting to know, though, for sure, whether they did pay out something and how much they would have had to pay. It's not a good thing. I guess they would not want to really publish that information. Our next story is going to be of interest to any particularly AM radio DXers out there who like to go listening for, interesting long-distance AM radio stations. The FCC okays new pre-sunrise and post-sunset authorizations for AM stations. This by Elle Kehres of Radioworld. On Thursday, the FCC announced it has implemented new tools to determine permissible pre-sunrise and post-sunset operating parameter for eligible AM radio stations. This means, pursuant to current Commission guidelines, AM licensees can once again apply for authorization to operate at increased power during the 2 hours immediately preceding local sunrise, and that's what's called a PSRA, pre-sunrise authorization. And the 2 hours immediately following the local sunset, that's known as a PSSA, or post-sunset authorization. Thousands of AM radio stations, many of them Class D stations, are required by the FCC's rules to reduce their power, use a more restrictive coverage pattern, or cease operating at night to avoid interference to other AM stations. Other Class D stations operate with pre-sunrise authorizations and post-sunset authorizations during some months with special authorization from the FCC, as aforementioned. However, because of a lack of suitable software, the Commission has not granted new PSRA and PSSA authorizations for several years. In March 2007, the FCC Media Bureau withdrew all PSRAs and PSSAs issued before February 2007 in order to recalculate operating powers following enactment of the U.S. Energy Policy Act of 2005, which lengthened the duration of daylight saving time and consequently changed the local sunrise and sunset times for most parts of the country. However, according to an FCC press release, due to an unanticipated computer problem that produced erroneous power levels on certain of these recalculated authorizations, the Bureau suspended use of its recalculated PSRAs and PSSAs until correct power levels could be computed. In today's notice, the FCC said it recognizes that not all eligible AM radio stations will elect to operate with pre-sunrise and post-sunset authority. Therefore, effective immediately and pursuant to Section 73.99E, the Audio Division will accept letter requests from AM stations intending to operate PSRA or PSSA. Per the Commission, interested AM licensees should submit the letter of request to Joseph Cizensi or Jerome Manarchuk of the FCC Audio Division AM engineering staff. The request must include the license name, station call sign, facility ID, frequency, location, and the file number of the licensed daytime facility, an indication as to whether the licensee intends PSRA operation, PSSA operation, or both, and a description of the method whereby any necessary power reduction will be achieved. The FCC said permissible powers for PSRA and PSSA operation will be calculated using the daytime antenna system or critical hours antenna systems when specified on the license. So some of you may not know this, but there are what are called daytime radio stations that are usually lower powered. They cover smaller areas, and they're often on frequencies where there are much more powerful stations whose signals travel much further at night. So these lower powered stations are given these restrictions where they either have to really reduce their power to a very low level or go off the air completely. And there used to be quite a lot of these stations. There seems to be a lot of them that seem to be cheating right now, because we see a lot of people DXing certain stations that are supposed to be running on like 5 watts or something, and all of a sudden, they're on a channel that's normally where they're not heard at nighttime. So this will give them a little bit more leeway to extend their morning broadcast, start a little bit earlier, and go a little bit later in the evening. So I guess they didn't play catch up with all of this when they started changing daylight saving time. So I guess that's what they're up to now. So as I say, they don't know how many stations will take advantage of this. So far, they don't seem to be really policing the stations that have been kind of doing it without permission. There are quite a few of them that get logged by DXers. There's stations that should be using this, but in many cases are not. So this will probably tighten up the rules a little bit more, I guess.
Reminds me of the first time I ever heard one of those stations when I was a teenager, and there was one near Montreal on 1040 kilohertz, I believe, and they were calling themselves Radio Soleil, which means Radio Sun, basically. And now I understood at one point why, because I was listening as the sun was setting, and they just broadcast a little message saying, because of the rules of the CRTC, we have to shut down at sunset. And I was like, what? Station has to shut down at sunset? Okay.
Yeah, that 1040 station was on basically a clear channel. They used to be on 1090 before that, and they would shut down at sunset. And then you'd hear Baltimore coming through with a 50 kilowatt signal on that station, on that frequency. So,
in our next story, and I'm not sure it's going to get better, 72% of Americans struggle to identify trustworthy media content. This is via Radio Inc. As generative AI rapidly and drastically reshapes the media landscape, its impact on content creation and dissemination, particularly when it comes to news, has become an area of extreme concern in the United States as the 2024 elections approach. According to a larger Reuters Institute study about digital media as a whole, these concerns are intensifying, with 72% of Americans worried about distinguishing real from fake content where they receive their news, a sentiment that has grown by 3 percentage points from the previous year. The news comes after a separate study found that AM/FM radio has emerged as the most trusted news source in the U.S., with its credibility increasing from 60 to 63% over the past 4 years. The growing use of AI in news production introduces both opportunities and challenges. AI technologies like generative AI are being increasingly employed to produce content that ranges from written articles to synthetic audio and video. This AI-generated content, while innovative, has a much higher risk of spreading misinformation, especially when it comes to politically sensitive topics. For instance, AI-generated audio clips mimicking public figures could spread false information quickly, influencing voter perceptions without their knowledge of the content's artificial origin. Disclosure of AI use in political ads is a point of interest currently being debated by the FCC and the FEC when it comes to radio and TV. The stress of deception and misinformation is even more pronounced on social media. Reuters found more than a quarter of TikTok users in the U.S. admitted difficulty in discerning trustworthy news on the platform. Users across other major platforms like X, Twitter, and YouTube also face challenges in identifying credible content amidst the flood of information available online. Experts argue that building and maintaining public trust in this new digital age will require a concerted effort from all stakeholders involved: regulators, platforms, and news creators. Human moderators and fact-checkers remain crucial in verifying content accuracy. I was listening to actually AM radio the other day to test the radio, and I came across an ad, and for a moment, I wondered if the voice in the ad was computer generated or not. It was very human-like, but there was these little things in the way that it was pronounced and the spacing between the words that's made it sound more machine-like. So, when you start hearing that, you're like, yeah, more and more it's going to be difficult to really make a difference. And as it gets better, it'll be almost impossible to know if it's real or fake.
I think it's particularly dangerous with radio because there's no visual aspect to it. It's just a voice coming out of the radio. And like you said, if, as it gets better and better in its ability to mimic the real human voice, I could envision completely AI formatted radio stations.
Yep.
Where there are no people. The whole thing is just sort of programmed and put out there. And will regulations come out that say this is AI generated or not? I don't know. It's going to be something to watch, and as this article proves, 72% of the American population are already having difficulty with it, and we're just basically scratching the surface right now. Our next story, we want to thank one of our regular listeners, John Fisher, down in North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Found this one on Inside Radio. Affiliates surprised by the USA Radio News ending service. Many of you, if you're radio medium wave DXers, you've probably run across stations running the USA Radio Network. Well, the USA Radio Network has ceased producing content for its USA Radio News service, which provided newscasts to nationwide affiliates. USA Radio News offered top-of-the-hour newscasts in 3 lengths, from 2 minutes to 5 minutes, and a 2-minute bottom-of-the-hour newscast. Some affiliates were apparently in the dark about the change, with hometown multimedia classic hits WCTR in Chestertown, Maryland on 1530, notifying Inside Radio that hourly newscasts were not available as of this past weekend. Talk Radio Network, which distributes USA Radio Network programming, posted an update on the USA Radio News description page, which read, "Those with operational control of USA Radio News have decided to shut down the service effective Friday, June 14th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. USA Radio Network and Talk Radio Network has not provided any additional information on the change. USA Radio News appears to be the only program that has been discontinued. The network offers a variety of programs, including Doug Stevens' Good Day, The Wayne Allen Root Show, USA Christian News, The Ron Sergiu Show, and Radio Law Talk. Stefan recently ended his weekly morning show and is now producing a pair of weekend programs, Good Day Saturday and Good Day Sunday. So why are they doing this? Cost saving? Gathering news is probably costly, takes people, and I guess they just decided, well, we're not going to do this anymore. We'll give you some programming, but we're not going to give you these news broadcasts anymore. So those stations may now have to find a new source or just not carry any news.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun was rather quiet this week, but there is a huge sunspot that is threatening, so we never know what's going to happen. There was a possibility of geomagnetic storming that didn't really materialize this week, and there's still a possibility today, June 14th, for a possible G1 class geomagnetic storm to happen because of a stream of solar wind. So if conditions are not that great, that could be it. In the week ahead, well, we've got the sunspots AR 3738 and 3743. That could flare. That will be something to look at. Or else, well, it's rather quiet, but we are in high solar activity phase. Sunspot number 188 and the solar flux 205. So hopefully this week, good propagation. And if so, the only way to really notice all of this is to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Rita Barrett from Harleysville, Pennsylvania. You're listening to the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
So in our next news, Ofcom, the UK Office of Communications, delays launch of BBC Radio 2 Pop Nostalgia service. This is from Mike Terry, UK, via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio I.O. Group. Source, The Media Leader, by Elle Sagar. Ofcom has blocked one of 3 proposed early launches of BBC spin-off stations and requested a full public interest test and regulatory process. The BBC announced in February its intention to launch 4 distinctive digital music stations as extensions for Radio 1, 2, and 3. The move faced pushback from commercial radio players as an attempt to directly imitate the recent success of commercial stations. Ofcom now requires the BBC to be subject to a full public interest test and regulatory process for its intended BBC Sounds launch of a Radio 2 Pop Nostalgia service. Separately, the media regulator has allowed the new Radio 1 service covering the 2000s and Radio 3 Chill station to proceed on BBC Sounds. Commenting on Ofcom's decision, Radio Centre CEO Matt Payton said, "This decision represents a significant shift by Ofcom, as it is the first time that it has accepted that an online-only BBC radio service could have a material impact on competition. This stands to reason, considering the rapid growth in online radio listening and the importance of online revenues. Obviously, We would have preferred to see all of these new BBC services subject to a full public interest test and regulatory process. However, this is an encouraging first step. Hopefully, it signals a greater focus from Ofcom on BBC accountability and market impact, which is something that we will also be seeking from the new government. There are separate regulatory processes for streams on BBC Sounds and DAB+ stations. BBC Sound streams require the BBC to assess whether they constitute a material change that may have a significant adverse impact on fair and effective competition. Ofcom then reviews this assessment and decides whether it agrees. If Ofcom agrees that there is a material change, the BBC will be subject to a public interest test. DAB+ stations will be required to undertake a public interest test followed by Ofcom's competition assessment. An Ofcom spokesperson told the media leader, "We will publish our decision in the coming days on whether the BBC's plans require a public interest test." So this we see it here too, where competition of online and of radio and other sources are really starting to get the heat of there's a lot of stuff and a lot of platforms. We're all competing together, and now we need to have some form of regulation to make sure that we agree on it and that it's fair competition, including the BBC.
Yeah, there was a time when the UK only had the BBC and independent stations were not permitted, which sparked the whole pirate radio scene, offshore stations, which became, in many cases, more popular than the BBC. So this is kind of the BBC coming back at this now, saying, okay, you've got your commercial stations out there. Well, we want to get into that game as well. So we want to put these new digital stations on the air. And the guys that have been there for a while running their stations are now saying, well, they didn't want to do this before. Now suddenly they want to step into our market. So, there's going to be some serious investigation into this and deciding who gets to do what. So the BBC might not have the kind of clout that it's had in the past of sort of being able to do what it wants to do. Our final story today, it seems like we have one of these a week. We could call it the Taliban story of the week. So much news coming out of Afghanistan. And once again, via Radio Info Asia, Taliban shuts down a private radio station in Kawoon Ghag. The Taliban General Directorate of Intelligence, the GDI, has shut down the private radio station Kawoon Ghag, which has been operating in the eastern Laghman province for about 2 decades, claiming that it is, quote, property of the government, according to the Afghanistan Journalists Center. On June 13th, Laghman Province Intelligence Department members entered the station's office in the presence of representatives from the local administration and the Information and Culture Department and took it off the air, according to a local source. The station's managing director has filed a complaint with the Taliban-run Ministry of Information and Culture, but it has not produced any results. According to the director, the station was established in 2005 in Matariam, the capital of Eastern Laghman Province, with financial support from Internews, and in accordance with an agreement with the local administration. A piece of land was allocated for it, and a 1-story building was constructed. He said that the radio holds licenses from the Ministries of Information and Culture, Communications and Information Technology, and Industry and Commerce. The Ministry of Industry and Commerce's investment license is issued in the name of the station director, and the Ministry of Communications license categorizes the radio station as private. The director confirmed that taxes have been paid continuously based on these licenses. However, the license issued by the Ministry of Information and Culture in 2016 lists the Laghman Scientific and Cultural Association as the owner. Article 4 of the Afghan media law stipulates that no natural or legal person can prevent, sanction, censor, or restrict the free activities of news or information media or interfere in their affairs and publication. The AFJC condemned the shutting down of the Kawoon Ghag radio station as a clear violation of press freedom and urged the local Taliban authorities in Laghman to promptly allow for its immediate and unconditional reopening. The Media Complaints and Violations Commission, led by the Taliban's acting Minister of Information and Culture, is scheduled to investigate the matter this week. So we have another example of, this Taliban government's got so many departments and ministries and commissions and what have you. I think, the more of these you have and the more difficult it is to get licenses and the more difficult it is to do what you want to do. That gives these organizations the ability to go in and do things like this, of pulling radio stations off the air that they don't necessarily like. So once again, another voice is being shut down by them.
Yeah, it's obvious that they're going, after all the stations that they just don't want to be on the air because of whatever they say, or the press freedom isn't there anymore. So it's going to end up by being, just what the government runs and wants to hear.
Yeah, I think what might be happening in some of these now is that they just don't like the content. It goes against Taliban rules and regulations of what you can do and what you can't do. So some of them may not be politically driven, but may just be breaking certain rules and laws that the Taliban government has. So we'll continue, I think, to see more and more of this in the weeks and months ahead.
So we have upcoming ham radio contests.
It looks like a busy weekend coming up for amateur radio operators around the world. First, organized by the Brazilian Amateur Radio League, is the LABRE DX Contest, 0100 July 20th to 2359 Zulu July 21st. The objective for this one, for amateurs worldwide to contact as many amateurs from Brazil and Brazilian prefixes as possible during the contest period. It's all the major bands, 160 through 10 meters, no work bands. The modes are single sideband and CW.
Organized by the International Amateur Radio Union, IARU Region 1 70 megahertz contest, 1400 hours Zulu, July 20th to 1400 Zulu, July 21st. The band, of course, is 70 megahertz, and modes are CW and SSB.
If you're into radio teletype, the National Contest Journal is organizing the North American QSO Party RTTY, 1800 Zulu, July 20th to 0559 Zulu, July 21st. It is 80 through 10 meters only. The mode is radio teletype.
The CQ Worldwide VHF Contest, 1800 Zulu, July 20th to 21 Zulu, July 21st. It's organized by CQ Magazine, and the contest promotes VHF activity on the 6 and 2 meter bands with participation from around the world. So it's 6 and 2 meters. The modes: phone, SSB, AM, FM, CW, and digital modes such as FT8, FT4, and MSK 144.
And I always like this one, organized by the Flying Pigs QRP Clubs International. The Run for the Bacon QRP Contest, 2300 Zulu, July 21st to 0100 Zulu, July 22nd, so only 2 hours long. It is 160 through 10 meters only, no work bands. It is CW only and low power only, so a challenging contest there.
And we are out of time.
Once again, we thank you for listening to us. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email address, radioreport@yahoo.com, and we're live streaming and archived at the CKUT website, ckut.ca here in Montreal. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, we welcome some new members this week. We have Adam in Poland, Michael in Nienburg, Germany, and Kevin in Minnesota. We thank you for joining us, along with the close to 1,000 members we're approaching on the Facebook group, so look for us there. Our YouTube channel as well has over 1,000 subscribers now. It is found on YouTube at IRR. And finally, our X account at IRRCKUT. We invite you to follow us there. So that's it for this week. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you again next Sunday morning on the International Radio Report here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye for now.